How's everybody doing today? Oh my God. Day 2 of Hack Fort. Day 2 of Tree Fort. Day 3 of Tree Fort. Oh my God. It's been a really wild festival this year. A lot of people showed up. That makes me really happy. Again, my name's Sean Wakely. I'm the director of Hack Fort. I really appreciate you guys coming out. I am so excited about this panel. I have had the pleasure of working with Will and Zach from SpaceBar the last few years. As a big nerd and a huge nostalgia fan for arcades, because that was something we had when I was a kid, for these guys to bring that back as a bar and a place for us to go and play these old games, it's always just been near and dear to my heart. But one thing that Zach and Will have done that I just thought is so cool is they see the value in not only bringing these old games in, but making new games and collaborating with local engineers, and specifically this time, Boise State. And I'm real excited about this, and I'll turn it over to you guys. But, I just want to say thank you guys so much for putting in all the work this year. The cabinet they've made is in the expo hall. Go try playing it. And it will be moved to SpaceBar. So, oh yeah, speaking of that, new SpaceBar guys, if you haven't been there, please go. Please go support Will and Zach. They're the best. SpaceBar is right off Capitol. It's right next to where the old SpaceBar was. Yeah, right next to Western Proper. They're still in a basement. Will, I don't know if you...
620 Idaho.
That's the address.
Yep. That's it.
Thank you guys so much.
Thanks,
Let's have
Sean.
some fun.
We love you.
Oh, thank you.
Does it reach? The clicker. It's part of the. Oh, yeah.
I'll go click the computer. Okay. You want to start talking?
Thank you, Sean, for the introduction. And I'll let these guys introduce themselves, but I'm Zach Rowland, and this is Will Hay. We are SpaceBar Arcade. I'll keep it short and sweet because it's not about us. It's about Robot Revolution and these fine students that created this wonderful game for everybody to enjoy. Just a little background about SpaceBar. We are a arcade bar located in downtown Boise. We just recently relocated to 620 Idaho Street. We were located on 200 North Capitol for about a decade. We just opened up our new space. We're really excited about that. And yes, we do love arcade games. We do love old. We do love new. Last Tree Fort, Ed Vasco, who is he is a cybersecurity professor at Boise State, reached out to us after our last talk and said, "Hey, I got some people that you should meet." And he was talking about the new product development group at Boise State and introduced us to these fine students. He says, get a list of the wildest dreams that you want to do, and those guys will make it happen. And one of them was a custom independent arcade game, and which they have delivered on and keep delivering on. So we're really excited about this game and what it's becoming and how it's playing, and it's really fun. And that's all I want to say because it's all about the game, not SpaceBar. So, do you want to add anything?
No.
Without further ado, I'll turn it over to the students here, and I'll let them talk about it and all the facets of it and everything. So, thank you.
Is this okay? Okay. So first thing we'll kind of go into now is, by the way, my name is Sydney. I was one of the person that worked mainly on the artwork and the graphics of the game. You want to go here?
Oh, yeah. My name is Serena. I also got to work on the art and graphics as well as like some of the animation. So yeah, pretty cool.
And I'm Marina. I was the main person that did all the software development for the game.
I think the clicker's broke.
The clicker could be broke.
We gotta.
I do, yeah.
Sweet.
Try it. Yeah, it doesn't work.
Oh.
Yeah.
So first we'll talk about is the conceptualization of the game. And Rena, how about you start off. Oh yeah, we'll talk about the conceptualization of like the mechanics. So overall style of the game. You know, like, are we gonna have power-ups? Like, are we gonna shoot things? What is it gonna be look like? And then Serena and I will talk more into the artwork and all of our inspiration for the artwork that we've created.
All right, so for the game, we came up with quite a few ideas. Some of them were like platformers, something like Super Mario Bros. One of the ones that we decided with and stuck with was a roguelike, which is essentially a game where power-ups come throughout the game that buff you up and allow you to do more crazier things, make you more powerful, but isn't that quite necessary? So for some inspirations I took for like how the game would look, the one on the left there is a roguelike shoot 'em up called 20 Minutes Till Dawn. It's essentially the exact same concept, and it's actually a clone of a game on the right called Vampire Survivors.
Oh yeah. So basically in any game creation, we kind of start with like concept art. And so what you're seeing right here is the concept art for the robot design. So like it's the basic enemy that you'll be playing against throughout the game. And so a lot of the inspiration, I know that like for even like Sydney as well, we liked a little bit more of like the 70s, 50s, like they get dated back kind of idea. So a little bit like retro. I liked a little bit of like Portal where everything is kind of rounded instead of like most things when you're like assume it's a robot is pretty like harsh edges. So pretty much it was like rounded, and the whole idea is kind of like in space there's these robots, they're invading you and they're turning more people into more robots. So that's why you see a little brain in one. But these were some of the inspirations. So as I said, a lot of Portal, but also it took place from a lot of other things like Breath of the Wild. And creepy, crittery little spider legs. That's a big thing for some reason. And another, like, going back into, like, that whole thing of, like, dated kind of 50s, kind of like Fallout. Like, you have a lot of, like, those kind of retro things is what my thought was. So there was working on a lot of power-ups. And those are just the basic concept arts for, like, the healing, the power-ups and stuff that you can use.
So I mainly worked a lot on the main character design, environment, and also the boss as well. So first thing here is just to show like some of the two designs that we went through for the main character. So one thing that I thought about was like, oh, space cowboy, like how cool is that? Everyone loves the space cowboy. But something that the guys over at SpaceBar were talking to us about when we first started conceptualizing this game is they were pretty much just telling us their goal for the bar. And one thing that they said to us is that they wanted people to come in and not have to deal with the outside world. They can come in and be a completely different person, and they can escape from reality, pretty much, is what you guys explained to us. And when I was creating the main character, I wanted to keep in mind of this sort of sentiment that you could be anyone you wanted to be when you're in the bar. So something that was important to me when creating the main character was anonymity. So you know, you cannot see the face of the cowboy. You just see the eyes, or the cowgirl. And I mean, it could literally be anyone. It could be you fighting all of these robots, traveling through space, killing baddies. And here was another design I did. You can clearly see that this was really based off of a lot of that 70s retro sci-fi art that I really fell in love into when doing a lot of research for this. And then obviously there was a lot of my inspiration there. Western 70s, especially also for the environment. We wanted to really go into, also, I think we agreed like keeping the color palette to just a few colors. Like we didn't want to go super crazy, make it realistic. We knew what we wanted to do was go into pixel art as well. But and then here are some of the boss. I know some of the other enemies, we have like an ice wizard, you know, but if we're fighting robots, let's make the main boss a big robot with multiple arms. Maybe they have a sword, right? So hopefully if you guys play this in the bar, you'll be able to fight the boss, the leader of the robots. And then, so now it's coming into pixel art. And the guys were really talking about a lot of the games that they love, and some of them being like Sinistar. And I think Serena and I really were like, oh, that's really dope looking. Like, let's do that. So something we took a lot of inspiration from also is increasing the pixel size of the canvas to have our bosses being a little bit more higher quality compared to the rest of your surroundings, and that way the bosses really pop out and like it's a boss. And then, based on our inspiration, this is where we got to. And yeah, we have our bosses, we have our environments, we have splash screens for our environments. You go through portals. So you want to talk more about that?
Yeah, so I think a big thing, honestly, now that I kind of look back at it, is that like everything is kind of like, well, synthetic. And so I think what we kind of notice with our bosses is that they're kind of very organic. And I think that's part of like the balance of everything. So like Sydney put a lot of effort into like the desert and the ice boss and the final boss. I thought they looked amazing. Like, and even the last one was kind of like almost like operatic, organic kind of energy. And then like I got to do the jungle and I got to do the scorpion, which was pretty fun. And yeah, everything was kind of just like a combination of us both doing like little pixel arts and like GIFs and all sorts of animations in there. So yeah, pretty good.
All right. So next up, we're going to be going over like the game logic, how it all works. I do believe first I made a little time lapse of the development of like various points in development. Oh no, not quite there. So, our first thought with like sort of like the development and how we're going to do this is what if we could travel to different worlds, and that's kind of how we got to the portals, and we tried to figure out a way to make it like we want it to be weird but still make sense in the universe that we were making. So some of the key points for the logic are RAM generation, the boss mechanics, and how the entire game will stop and freeze when you choose your power-ups. Here's the video, speaking of. So this portion never really changed. I made this in the first week. It was a really good retro style. But this is where everything changes a lot. Choppy movement, basic sprites, nothing really too fancy or anything. The logic for the enemy movement never really changed. Neither did the bullets. But let's see if we'll. I made this part too long. There we go. Now so the first part was back in about October. This is about in January. We finally have some tiles in. Some like on the ice map, you will slide if you let go of the controls. And then it's just everything makes more sense. Here's the power-ups, which you can choose. And then here, looks like audio's not going through, but now we finally have music. We have we have translation screens. We have brand new UI. It all looks very polished. I guess internet's bad in here. This was taken. I recorded this yesterday, and that's basically the gist of how the game progressed. So I'm going to skip through that. Why did? Oh. Okay, there we go. So for the RAM generation, I had to use some kind of new mechanics I wasn't too familiar with. A new, enums or enumerators. They're essentially pieces of code that have their own custom values. So like when you're working with numbers, it can only be a number. If we're working with some characters, it can only be a string. But with this, you're able to set what specific values you want for it. Like what, so like for the environments, I would do like tile type deserts, specific, and dot would be the specific type, whether I want rock, a hole, a dead bush, something like that. The biomes were just very simple lists. We have 4 different biomes that the game randomly selects for you at the very beginning. It picks which one, and then it uses that information to generate the tiles at random using enumerators. And then for the actual decision on what to decide as, I used a weighting system. So it would generate a random number, sometimes 1 through 100, sometimes 1 through 10, depending on how I want to structure it. And then based off the number, it would choose which one. And there are some situations like If there was a rock, I didn't want the entire map filled with rocks, even with just 1%. That's still way too much. So what I did was I had to go through a second loop of weights. So if the weight was correct on there, then it would place a rock. Otherwise, it would just place something else. For the boss mechanics, there are two different ways I did this. There were boss managed and isolated. For ones that are boss managed, that's basically the boss itself. It contains its mechanics and it creates its attacks for it. That would be like the jungle boss, where it creates a puddle of acid that pops right where it is. For isolated, there are things like the snake that shoots lasers out of its eyes. It creates its own laser object, and then that is what controls itself. It chooses where it goes. It handles how far it stretches. It handles applying the damage. To know when to apply the damage properly, I had to use the Unity animator events, which are as simple as going to the frame you want, pressing the event button, and choosing which function you want to run. Some inspirations for the bosses. One of the main ones for the ice boss, it will summon a javelin that will spin around for a second and then start tracking the player. I took big inspiration from the Undyne battle from Undertale because of the summoning, because I'm not sure how many of you have played Undertale, but when the spears summon, they kind of spin for like half a second, gradually slow down, and then track the player. And something I'm most proud of is the pause game on power up. So to give some idea, for the power up selection, it was just simple tracking how far the flight stick is moved, and then changing which background was red to signify which one was selected, and keeping track of that number to know which one to give when they chose that. To understand where everything was and what everything had, I'd use inter-object communication with classes. So at the very beginning of the game, would generate all the power-ups that would be grabbed at random, and each power-up object would contain all the data it needed. For the actual stopping, this is what I'm most proud of. It's all it does is when you need to stop the entire game, you set one Boolean to true, which is stop. Then it loops through everything. It says, hey, is this still going on? Is this stop? Cool, turn it off. And then it has a secondary Boolean to say everything's done. So it doesn't loop through. And then all you have to do to turn it off is turn that one Boolean off. It restarts the entire game for you again.
Yeah, so now we're just gonna go into some of the music in the cabinet creation. So if you want to click next, please. Sorry.
Oh yeah, so I actually got to hire it out to one of my friends, and I basically told him, I was like, well, think really metal and make basically anything that feels kind of like they would belong in a game and make it loopable. And so that's all I gave him. So I think what he produced was really impressive. He did one for each of the biomes, and for the final boss one, I basically was just like, looking at the boss that Sydney created, I was like, you got to do something that feels kind of like metal and operatic. Like it has to be a powerful ending. And I think it just turned out amazing. So if you hear it, it will be stuck in your head if you stand to the cabinet too long. But yeah, so with him and the help of his sister and a few friends, they did all the music.
So obviously, here is our very naked cabinet over on the left. And there's our wonderful manager, Gray. He helped us out a lot on applying the vinyls and getting a lot of our materials ready. So when it came to the cabinet, Serena and I were the ones that did pretty much all the artwork that you see on there. However, we have to give a huge shout out to the rest of our coworkers who work at New Product Development. They are the ones that 3D printed our little handgun that you use as a controller, the robot head. They're the ones that cut the vinyl and also cut the acrylic that you see that overlays everything. They also helped us out with a little minor electrical engineering that's a part of it. So even though they were really only working on the cabinet, like they helped us out a lot with the creation, and they are the ones that really helped all of this come together into a really nice, polished cabinet. So yeah, shout out to all of our engineers at MPD. All right. So now I believe we have, let's see, 30 minutes actually for Q&A or yeah. So yeah. So if there are any questions you want to ask us, we are happy to answer, explain everything more. And yeah.
Are you guys releasing it on itch or anything like that? Would I be able to play it at home, or is it cab only for now?
Right now it's only cab only, but I think Rena, would we be able to get the controls something to apply?
We'd have to either set up like an Xbox controller or something. But eventually, if that's the direction we want to go to, I don't see it being horribly difficult.
You got a bully spacebar. It's their game technically, so
It's exclusive.
Hi. How long did it take to like from start to finish to go through all the process to finally finish the game? I was curious about that.
So from initial contact with SpaceBar to today, it was about. Let's see, we started in August, yeah.
Yeah, so you guys came to us over the summer in like July, and that's where they gave us I am not kidding when they say they gave us a massive list like of things they wanted, and we all said, okay, let's focus on the arcade cabinet as the first thing we do. And so, but I would say August till now, yeah.
Yeah, so that's what, about 8 months, give or take?
Yeah, a little under a year. We also were pushing very hard. We wanted to get this done by Hackfort pretty much. So it was go, 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 go.
All right. Something I appreciate about arcade cabinets is when they have like unique controls or something. Like when I'm walking through the arcade, I see like a steering wheel or something weird. I'm just going to go check it out. So I like that it was cool that you have like a handgun for an analog stick and things like that. I guess what went into the development of the physical controls, or what was your thoughts on your arcade controls like that?
So as for the development, it's actually just a pretty simple USB breaker board. All of the controls have just tiny like 5-volt wires that clip right onto the board, and then it translates to Windows as like joystick 1 button 3 or something like that. So it's really just plug and play, and then Unity is what we use to make it. Unity just listens for those, just like same way a game listens for W for forward.
I think as far as like the design, that kind of came last, honestly. They gave us like a little pre-board, like on a wooden block, and we kind of like got to mess with them and have fun and like think about switches. And then when we got done with it, we're kind of like, a flight stick looks a little off here. And so we kind of like, we're all in the lab like thinking about it. And then I don't really know who came up with the idea with the gun. It was Gray. That's our boss. So yeah, and then like on the offhand, we're like, oh, robot head, because both of them need something. All right. So yeah, that's a little bit went into that.
A lot of things at the office go, but what if we did this? And we go through with it.
Very cool. Thanks.
I think this question is for each one of you. Could you describe an instance you had difficulty working on this project and how you overcame it, please?
I can go first. So it's pretty much asking like where we struggled and how we overcame it, right?
Yeah. What were some of the more tricky parts and how did you solve it?
For me personally, I think one thing that I have learned specifically, and I think I overcame towards the end, was a little bit of that project management aspect of all of this. Timing, when are we going to get things done? I feel like for a little bit there, I was like failing miserably at that. So I think towards the end, I don't know what happened, but excuse my French, I got my shit together. And all of a sudden it just clicked for me. And also another thing was, I'm not very savvy with animation, and I tried my very best on a lot of things, but I think I really appreciate the help that Serena did because, yeah, I draw out the bosses and I'd be like, I can't do this. So she helped me out a lot on that as well. And so asking for help, one, and then also a lot of project management was 2 areas that were something that I think I really overcame myself with this whole project.
I mean, yeah, I think honestly, animation was a interesting part because I really appreciated yours. Yours was probably the more fun to animate to me, anyways, because I spent way too long looking at my own stuff while I was drawing them. But yeah, it was more of just like having to think about it because I would give like Rena like a bunch of like assets thinking that it's everything that she'll need, and then like suddenly it's like, oh, actually you need like more of these, and I just realized that yeah, you probably should see the full 360 of the boss that is chasing you. And so having to animate that and then like be creative with it is a little interesting, but it's fun. So
As for me, probably the most difficult part of all of this was Unity not doing the same thing in a final build that it does in the editor, and trying to figure out how to see why that's happening. So I had to learn more about how Unity creates arrays from objects it grabs, and how to find logs in the app data when it's not available just in the editor for me.
Hey everyone, great work. It looks wonderful. Haven't had a chance to play the game yet. My questions are actually for the SpaceBar guys. If what kind of considerations did you give them as far as like how it's going to fit into a bar? Because obviously, like arcade cabinets, when growing up, when I was playing arcade games, I was pumping quarters in, and I was expecting a play experience of a certain length and increasing difficulty to a point where I ran out of money or I beat the game. What kind of stuff did you give them in that regard?
That's a good question, and I think that there, how do I say this? There may have been an age gap here between their experience and Will and I's experience with games, and because they're more used to console and newer games and computer games, and they're quite different than the arcade game. And the arcade games were designed for operators to generate revenue, and so there is a different. So like home console games are more of a story that you progress through and you play for a long time, as where arcade games you maybe play for 2 or 3 minutes max as a casual player, but then when you really get to be an advanced player, you may be playing for 30 minutes on one quarter, and you're just going through the same boards over and over and over with increasing difficulty or less time or whatever. Like, so we were trying to convey that, hey, this is not going to be what you're used to. This is going to have to be, lower game time and stuff like that, and just kind of increase difficulty as you go. And I think that they were took some really good cues on that as well. And as far as things that you wouldn't think about, as far as like if you put a quarter into a game, or if you start a console game at home, you can just walk away and it'll do whatever. But if you have in an arcade situation, if you put a quarter in, there has to be a time limit on it. It has to time out so that it's ready for the next person to play. So it either has to time out, the enemies have to kill you or whatever. So you can't just have it be stuck in an idle mode where someone needs to come up and play the game again. So there's some of those things that are taken into consideration.
Zach had a good, just quick knowledge for them that was easy to learn, difficult to master. And that was what they were tasked with. So,
does that answer, everything? So yeah, there's a very different style when it comes to arcade versus like a home console, and that's kind of like a lot of the new gamers and new game developers design for that, because the arcades are not as much as they used to be. So you used to play all your video games at the arcade, and then eventually we get ported over to the home console. And now it's kind of like the opposite. There's home console games that are getting ported back to the arcade because there's kind of this resurgence of indie development for arcades in arcade bars and things like that. So it's kind of a fun little resurgence of that. And we kind of wanted to see if we couldn't find some of that in Boise. And we found that with these guys and able to develop a game for us, because we've got a couple other independent cabinets in our arcade that are from out of Idaho. And we wanted to kind of have some more homegrown stuff. So that's where these guys come in. So it's been super fun.
So with that answer, I have a question for all of you. Have you played your game, and how well do you play it compared to what you're used to on a console?
All right, who's going first? We have Master 1 and Master 2.
I can go first.
Okay.
So during development, there was actually an issue where in order to test the very end of the game, I had to get there. I couldn't get there half the time. So that added a little extra time until eventually I was just like, you know what? I'm just gonna spend a half hour, make way for me to skip all this and get right to it. So to answer your question, I'm not very good at it. No.
At least you beat it.
One out of 10 times.
It's so funny because I'll like give Rena a new asset and Rena's like, I just updated it, you gotta try it out. And then I'll walk up and I could barely get through like maybe 3 of the enemies. I was really bad. It wasn't until they were like, hey, it's a little too hard that I was able to get to like the 2nd or 3rd level. So that's where I am. Pretty cool.
For me, when we first when Rena was showing us that video and it was just like grass and a white block, and we first had that random flight stick on a big old piece of wood, I made the comment, I was like, hey, this is really hard, like right off the bat. And I remember Rena's like, what are you talking about? Like, she's like, well, I can do it, and I'm like, well, I can't. So I think we played around with the controls a lot. We switched them first, and that made it worse. So we switched them back. And I would say that like I'm getting better. It's a game that I'm telling a lot of people that you have to play it a few times. Like once you play it 2 or 3 times, it's a little bit more like, okay, I'm starting to feel like this hand does the aiming, this hand does the moving, you know? And we understand that there's confusion too, because you're holding a gun. And it's like, well, I aim with the gun, right? And we're like, no. But for me, I beat it once. But you know, you always do something really cool and nobody's there to see you do it. But Andrew was there, but you know, all these guys weren't there, and I've been able to beat it once, but it's a difficult game. So yeah, what about you guys?
In my case, it takes 15 to get to the next level. So
I've only played it a few times, but I'm excited to play it. I think there's been some code updates since I've played it last, but I like games that are hard. They have to be hard. It has to feel good when you beat it. If they just hand it to you, then you're like, well, it doesn't feel like an achievement, or it doesn't feel like you've really earned something. So, but there is a delicate balance between the pedestrian folks that are just wanting to come up and enjoy a game to where you want a hardcore game for gamers. There's you have to strike a balance. So again, back to the easy to learn, hard to master. So a lot of the classic arcade games, you can walk up and understand the basics, like, okay, this moves around here and I need to avoid these enemies. But then to really start progressing through the game, you need to understand the patterns and the techniques and the point pressing and all these other things that you can do to really achieve a high score or get to a level that you've never been to. Or, a lot of old games, they just would time out or fill the memory or kill screen it or start glitching or whatever. So, but if you could get to that point, you're a pretty good player. So, easy to learn, hard to master. So I'd like to see if I can't get through it now with the code tweaks. So.
I thought it was difficult, but I, in all honesty, am not the biggest gamer, so it was difficult. But Zach made some great observations, and I think when you're in the game and you're developing the game, as these kids were doing, you start to learn the game a little bit more than a pedestrian person would, and so you maybe kick the intensity up because you're learning the game and being in it a little bit more than someone like me who would just walk up and play it. So Zach had some good feedback for them when we came and played it, and I think they took great strides to get that in the game. And the times I've played it afterwards, I've been able to make some more progression through the game, which is good.
So building on that, I'm kind of curious, like if you get the feedback that says, okay, it's too hard. So what on the back end in like the coding aspect would you change to make it easier or modify that gameplay?
So for the initial, make it a little bit easier as they requested when they checked out, I believe last week, I think. What I did was I made the enemies a little bit slower so that you don't get overwhelmed as easily. If I needed to make it easier again, I would probably make it so that the enemies only take one shot instead of two to be killed, because that's really what gets people. They hit it, they think, oh, I'm home free. No, you're not. And it would just be like making the enemies slower, making them weaker, or maybe making your bullets more powerful, just things like that.
Just curious as to, for the 3 students that were working on the game, what did you learn? What is one thing that you can take that you learned during this process that you'll move forward with your career aspirations?
It's a hard question, Mom. Thanks, Mom. I think for me, the most that I've taken away from this project personally is like that communication aspect between the whole team. And I think something that I know that I'm going to take away from this, that's something that I think I'm going to apply towards interviews if people ask questions on how I might handle, is taking like this project and saying, you know, there were some minor things that I had to help manage with my team, put some things together, schedule meetings. And again, towards the end, like I said earlier, like towards the end, I don't know what clicked in my brain, but it all made sense to me and everything started to smooth out more. But I think definitely towards when it comes to like my future career, as somebody who does want to sell their soul to a AAA company, I think I will say, you know, especially from this project, is I believe that I can do best sometimes with having to communicate through different teams, getting information from different teams, and scheduling and all that stuff. So.
She was always on top of it, and communicating with us, and making sure that we were up until today when we had our panel. She was texting, "Where are you guys?" She's doing great.
Yeah, I was also gonna say communication, but I think also with communication was also just like project managing. So like, you know, get your Trello, get your Team Gantt, whatever you have for just like meeting regularly. Because I know the biggest part is like, you don't know what you're doing unless you talk to someone doing the back end or the other person doing the art. Like, you can't just do it alone. And so I think that's something that will definitely continue on, obviously. But yeah, it was a struggle, like kind of getting kick started because everyone's like throwing around ideas. And so like for the first time, because we are engineers, we never had a project like this. And so like, I'm assuming in a game company, obviously they have their like thing. So like this section is working on our storyboards, and then this is like this, like they have a timeline, like a whole outline of how everything is supposed to kind of go. And so we had to make our own kind of from scratch on like our little Meister task and be like, okay, so I guess this is stage 1 of development. We should probably have our ideas figured out in a week or so before we do anything. And then we had to go to our concept stage, and then like it just was a weird little breakdown that we had to learn how to do on our own.
Yeah, I remember we had a moment in the development where Serena and I were like, oh yeah, we're gonna have like a huge open world that goes into other worlds. It just like naturally goes. And Rena's like, I thought we were doing portals. And we were all like, huh? Like,
we like drew like the same thing on a napkin, but we're all talking about 3 different things. So
so for me, this was the first time I worked on a multi-month long project where I was the only one that did the code base. Because before, like if I was working on a big project, I'd have other people be like, hey, I don't know what this does. Can you explain it to me? So this was all on me, and that was just a recipe for disaster. But so something I'll make sure that I do for the future is actually add comments to my code. Because what happened was I would do something like back in October that I needed to change in March. And I'm looking through and I'm like, I have no idea what I'm looking at.
change your file names too, please.
They're fine. One is literally called Input Manager. It manages the input.
They're all named the same thing.
They're all named the same thing.
Any other questions? Oh, we got another one.
Did you guys have any like specific limitations you tried to work within, like technically? I know for sometimes with like retro looking indie games, people will be like, "Oh, we're trying to follow like the NES color palette and sprite limitations," or was there just like a general vibe or era that you wanted it to look like? I'm just curious if any of that went into it.
So when Serena and I were doing a lot of our research for pixel art, something that we learned was obviously like the size of your canvas is what matters. And I think I'm forgetting the name of the game, but it has like the big squid skeleton guy.
Oh, Sky Cursor.
Sky Cursor, yeah. They had Sky, yeah, one of those. Sky's Cursor. We saw that the bosses had a much higher pixel density, and we were like, oh, that's really cool. But we also knew that the appeal, I believe, to that retro look. So we wanted to keep it pretty much all of our like canvases were like 64 by 64 pixels. And that's pretty much how we did all of our artwork was in that 64 by 64. We'd up it to like 128 by 128 pixel canvas for our bosses to give that little bit higher resolution look. But I think we just wanted to, we definitely took a lot of inspo from giving it a retro feel, but taking inspiration also from some of the newer indie looking games as well.
I think as far as just like restrictions, we did give ourselves restrictions because like we want to do a lot of things, but we don't want to cause chaos. And so a lot of it was like the two of us, we'd create like a mood board and we'd sit down and mull over it and do like a draft and be like, does this look fine? Does it look like it's the right size? Does it look like it'll work? And then like with each boss, we were like, oh, let's try to have like 3 to 4 moves. And like, then we're like, oh, we have to animate that. And so that is part of it. So like every boss should have like maybe 3 moves and maybe one that like slaughters you. I don't know. And so we did create like our own kind of limitations within it. So like even each realm, instead of choosing like each biome, we ended up being like, well, we did this color, so this one should be that color and this one should be that color. Have creative liberty. See if it turns out. So that's kind of what that was.
And on the programming side, there wasn't necessarily any limitations that were already there, but I didn't end up having to put a limitation on it because the project was too fast. On the transitionary video that plays when you go to a different menu, the game would load the new scene into so quickly that only 1 frame would play and it would immediately go to the next. So I ended up having to put like a 3-second delay just so the video would play through so it didn't look like it was broken.
This is a question for everybody. Favorite cabinet game? Favorite arcade game?
We're gonna start with me. Yeah, you start with you.
Tapper.
Joust.
Tron.
I don't remember the name of it, but it's kind of like a Broforce game almost. I'm so sorry.
Donkey Kong.
I guess favorite part working on the project.
I just look forward to sitting down with them and brainstorming and talking about design and artwork and concepts and and just kind of like having a free flow of ideas and seeing the progress that they were making. It was great. We're really proud of them. They did it was a hard task of what we presented them with, and they delivered and in an awesome way. So we're super proud of what they did.
Yeah, I'll second that, and by saying that we're very proud of these students, and like we put anything in front of them, and they're like, yeah, we'll figure that out. And I just love that can-do attitude of the team is like that was like we can't add that to the game. They'll just like we'll figure it out. So only solutions, not problems. One of my favorite things was just the kind of like spitballing of ideas, because they it's fun to get in a room of all gamers and like you just start like saying, oh, what about this? And like this from this game and like this. And then you kind of just like, you know, you don't know where you're going, but it's really fun to talk about it. So, but that's the most fun part is when you really start just gelling and stuff like fun stuff comes out and you're like, what about this part of the game? We have this really long list of Easter eggs that may make it in the game someday, but they're just really fun to talk about how they might present themselves. But that's one of the fun things. It's just like the spitballing.
I think for me was definitely getting out of like my comfort zone with a lot of the artwork and actually kind of applying the skills that I wish I want to use in my future and really, really applying it and really like, I got to make this look good. Like it's going to look really, really good. And that was really fun. And I also think that like, I just want to say like these guys are some like the best people I've like probably ever worked with. Like they are the most fun clients. Like sometimes we get a lot of curmudgeons into our office, and these guys are like a breath of fresh air. It was like they came in and they're like, "What's up?" And everybody loves them at the office, and we are really hoping we can do more projects with you guys. So, yeah, these guys are awesome. So that was also another fun part was just working with them and them also being so open to all of our ideas. We try and get them to be like, can you please make a decision on this? And they're like, no, it's your decision. And we're like, no. So yeah. So thank you for that, being so open.
That is definitely true. I've never seen anyone fight so hard for a t-shirt. They brought us a bunch of their t-shirts and everyone wanted one. But yeah, I would say favorite part was finally having something to kind of like do real concept art for. Like I do concept art for fun, for projects, but it was the fact that like they gave us so much creative freedom. Like we got to make it fun and you got to just throw a bunch of stuff out there. So like creating it was super fun, but I think being able to be like what they were saying about like, oh, you get to throw out all these ideas. It's like you finally get to like put whatever brain melding thing you have on paper, which is the funnest part to me is like, you never know what you're going to create.
My favorite part was actually finally being able to combine electronics with software, like in a realistic this would be something that I'll use in the industry one day. Because yes, I've worked with electronics before, but it's always been like small Arduino projects, something that's very niche that's never really gonna have a use. Building a game controller that's always going to have a use as long as the industry exists.
I think that's it. Sean?
Oh my God, that's a wrap. Yeah. Good job, guys. Thank you so much. And also please go to SpaceBar. Please check out the arcade cabinet. Please give all these guys a high five for real. You can see the labor of love. It's sitting out there in the expo right now. Thanks, guys.